29 du comité.
Welcome to meeting number 29 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans.
The ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people, and express gratitude we're able to do the important work of this committee on land they've stewarded since time immemorial. And just apologies, I got a bit of a frog in my voice today. Conformément à l'article 108.
Pursuant to Standing Order 108.2, the committee is meeting today to commence its study on recreational and traditional fishing for soft-shell clams. And today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members may participate in person or using the Zoom application.
Continue, I would like to ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table in front of you. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, but particularly the interpreters. So, pursuant to our motions, I can advise the committee that all witnesses appearing today have done the required testing. Et pour garantir le bon déroulement de cela.
To ensure that the meeting goes smoothly, I would like to share a few indications to witnesses and members. Before you take the floor, please wait until I recognize you. If you have joined us by video conference, click on the icon of the microphone to turn it on, and please turn it off when you are not speaking. As for interpretation, for those who are on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen between floor English or French, and for those in the room, you can use the headpiece and choose the channel that you wish. I remind you that all observations of members and of the witnesses must be addressed to the chair.
In the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand, and members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. Alors, à ce moment, j'aimerais maintenant souhaiter la bienvenue.
I would now like to welcome our witnesses. We have Dorina Allard, a fisherwoman, Gaston Bourdage, a fisherman, and by video conference, Ghislain Roberge, a fisherman. We will begin with the opening statements of our witnesses. You will each have 5 minutes or less, and we will begin with Ms. Allard.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak before you about the importance of opening new clam fishing areas in Chaleur Bay. I'm speaking to you today first as a 65-year-old woman, but above all as a daughter, sister, and mother from a long line of clam harvesters from Chaleur Bay. I began harvesting clams when I was very young, alongside my father, brothers, and sisters in the Saint-Omer region, a clam harvesting zone currently closed. For us, clam harvesting was more than an activity. It was a family ritual. It was a lesson in patience, respect for the sea, and above all, a way to understand that natural resources are borrowed from future generations. Now, more than 60 years later, I harvest clams with my children, my sisters, my brothers, my nieces and nephews, as well as their children, and with friends. But something has changed. Miigwech is not what it used to be. There are far too many people, too much harvesting, in an area that's too small and with limited access to the sea. When an ecosystem begins to show signs of strain, it's our traditions, our culture, and our future that are in jeopardy. Harvesters from Saint-Omer, such as I, who have access to the sea, can leave from where they are and reach the authorized harvesting site at Miigwech, but they need to walk roughly 2 kilometers round trip, carrying the required equipment and eventually their catch, carefully crossing the current of the Nouvelle River estuary, depending on the current and rising tides. Miigwech is located only a few kilometers from New Brunswick, where the neighboring shores support clam harvesting. I'm not speaking only as someone who's deeply attached to this place. I'm also speaking as a witness to the changes that have been accumulating year after year. We all want to continue to benefit from this resource, but to do so, we need to act intelligently and prudently. That's why I fully support, and I ask for your support, for the opening of new clam harvesting areas in Chaleur Bay. Opening new areas is not about opening the door to abuse. On the contrary, it's a protective measure. Doing so would alleviate pressure on the Miguasha bed, which can no longer sustain all the demand on its own, better spread out harvesters to avoid overfishing in any single location. Preserve the ecological balance of the bay so that the resource remains healthy and abundant, and ensure that our traditions can continue without putting future generations at risk. My wish is not to change our ways, but to give them a chance to survive. I want every child to feel, as I once did, the simple joy of finding a clam beneath their fingers, filling a small bucket, and then sharing a meal that tastes of the sea and of pride. But for this tradition to continue, we need to be responsible now. And responsibility today requires a collective decision to diversify our harvesting areas in order to protect the ones that already exist. Chaleur Bay is vast. The resource is there. We just need to manage it wisely by opening new areas, respecting natural cycles, and working together to ensure that clam harvesting remains an ecological, cultural, and family treasure. Thank you for your attention, and especially for your consideration of the future of our bay, our Francophone, Anglophone, and Indigenous communities, and of our traditions. Together, we can ensure that clam harvesting remains vibrant, sustainable, and accessible for all generations to come. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Allard. We will now hear Mr. Gasson-Bourdage. You have 5 minutes or less, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the members of the committee. Please lift your hand if you have ever gone soft shell clam fishing. I'm showing you a specimen. This was picked from the sands this morning. It is, of course, a shellfish that's protected by a shell, which is bivalve and flat. It's very sensitive, and it can be found up to 80 centimeters in depth in mud or sand, and it is taken out with equipment, even siphons, and it lives exposed to the tides. It's to be found in Canada, the United States, and even in certain areas of Europe. The history, the repertoire of the heritage culture of Quebec has been much affected by it. 360 clamshell fishing areas were used to be used, and only 87 are allowed to be used now. We have 88 possible sectors, areas in the Chaleur Bay, and 41 of them are closed at present. So we're only working in some of the zones for which permits used to be available. The newspaper, La Presse, has compared the taste of the soft-shell clam to blueberries, cranberries, maple syrup, and said that it is indeed a local delicacy. If you close, let's say, the picking of cranberries in Lac Saint-Jean or blueberries in the north of Quebec, there'd be a general culture. But unfortunately, though, soft-shell clam panic hasn't yet set in. Cleaning the water. 35 years ago, there were no restrictions. All areas were accessible, and there was no treating of the wastewater of the towns around. But right now, all towns manage their waters, and yet 41 of the areas are closed. And I have checked the water in the area of the Gaspé shore. Here's New Brunswick, and you can see the Chaleur Bay, and all these systems, apart from one small municipality, do clean their wastewater. And this magazine, La Gaspésie, has a 3-page article called The Spring Renewal, Effervescence printanière. And one of my neighbors, André Baba, wrote this. And for the soft-shell clam harvesting, it takes place early in April, and my family lives on the Parade des Aventures area, and as soon as the ice is out, my brother, father, and I go out with our shovels and buckets, even over the ice, and we take with us Micmac baskets that we call potato carriers, and they're very practical, I can tell you. So you can see that this is really a family tradition that still exists. Commercial fishing. One of my friends was a minister of regional development for the province, and he created a project involving a plant that could process 175 tons of clam shells, soft-shell clams, to create many jobs. Unfortunately, he lost the elections, and that file was left untouched. Now, Baie des Chaleurs. Chaleur Bay has a committee which evaluates a number of environmental issues and carried out a study in 2007, 2008, and 2009. In 2007, in the Bonaventure area, there were 100 and some fishers, and they fished a certain amount of clams. And in 2009, they were fishing more of them, from 120,000 up to from 69,000 up to 120,000. The document that they published said that we could open the clam sector as long as a committee from Fisheries and Oceans took charge of it. But Fisheries and Oceans never took charge of that at all. So we could have been fishing since 2012 on that site if the document that was written up, that plan, had been picked up by Fisheries and Oceans and implemented. So comparing us to the North Shore. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, Mr. Bordage. If you would kindly complete your opening statement. Yes, in the Baie de Mangam, my colleague, who is a member of a committee working up there, Guy Vigneault, received a letter on the 15th of March of this year stating that the study carried out on the area around Mangam will be opened. I just wanted to share that good news, that area will be open for harvesting. From experience, I can tell you that for someone from the Gaspé, soft-shell clam is just a life experience. It's something that anyone from our area has participated in at least once in their life. I began very young. I was 10 with my father, cousins, and uncles, and we would go get clams for Easter. Everyone in the area wanted their soft-shell clams for Easter. We would share the harvest. From year to year, the ceremony of going to get the soft-shell clams would always be a spring event. So many memories. And the first one to get a clam would jump up and say, "I've got a clam," and everyone would rush to that area. Thank you so much, Mr. Bordage. We will continue, and we shall hear from Mr. Roberge for 5 minutes or less. You have the floor, sir. Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to testify before this committee about the importance of opening new clam fishing areas in Chaleur Bay. I'm going to speak to you plainly, just as I am. I've been walking in the mud flats of Chaleur Bay for as long as I can remember. I grew up by the sea with a view of the clam digging bed. I started digging the clams myself with my dad when I was barely 5 years old. I remember him showing me how to do it properly, with respect for the sea and for nature. I've harvested clams all my life. Where I come from, clam digging is a family affair. It's about traditions and memories. It's part of who we are, part of our Gaspésie, part of our sea. And later, as I turn to do the same with my daughter, and then with my grandson, Raphael, I make him a little clam rake, and I watch him make his first tracks in the mud, so proud to be doing it all on his own. In that moment, I tell you, I saw myself again, a little boy with my dad right beside me, and I understood how important it is to keep this alive, to make sure this tradition doesn't disappear. The reason I'm taking the time to speak with you today is because I would like to see new clam fishing areas opened in the bay. It's not about depleting resources or doing things any which way. It's about spreading out the pressure, giving overfished areas a chance to breathe, ensuring that those who come after us will still enjoy the sea as we did. We know the bay. It runs in our veins. We can tell when it's doing well and when it's struggling. There are places that are ready to start producing again, and there are others that need a break. All I'm asking is that this be done intelligently with people who know the sea, with scientists if we need them, and with good old Gaspé common sense. My fishing days are behind me now. I've had my share of good times, though. I'm doing this for Raphael and for all the others who dream of watching the tides come in and go out, to find the right moment to wade into that mud, bucket in hand, breathing the salty air. I want this tradition to carry on. I want our people to keep experiencing it. Opening new areas means, as I say, breathing new life into an activity that's part of who we are. Thank you for your time. Thank you for thinking about the future of our bay, our people, and our young ones. Thank you. Thank you very much.
This round of questions, starting with Mr. Small for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Monsieur Bordage, not bad for an English fellow. No? Did I get it right? So you talked about the lack of restrictions on clam harvesting 35 years ago, when the protection of our marine ecosystems and our coastal areas was nowhere compared to what it is today. So do you think that the local coastal ecosystem is cleaner and that it should be less of an obstacle to opening areas for clam harvesting than it was 35 years ago because of the protection of the environment and waste management and whatnot?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question. It's an area that's, very specific. Science could answer your question, but from what I understand, 35 years ago, there was nowhere that water was being cleaned, wastewater. It went straight into the sea, straight into the water. And now, through the whole shore area, 12 municipalities, Maria, Bonaventure, New Richmond, New Carlisle, Possibiac, and so on and so forth, there's only one municipality at present that doesn't have a water treatment plant. All others have, basins, as they should, to treat human wastewater. And yet, we're told that there's pollution. They've been depolluting the system for 35 years. The real problem is that when the time comes to analyze the water, the money isn't there. DFO doesn't make the money available. That's the problem, getting the samples and analyze the coliforms and so on to see what's really going on. And the ZIP committee did this in 2007, 2008, and 2009. And their recommendation was to create a work group to work on opening that area. And it didn't take place.
Mr. Bourdage, there's a 4-step process in place in the Maritimes, and a 5-step process in place in Quebec. That areas have to pass through this process for new areas to be open, or for even areas that are open to stay open. Correct? So, not only is it a multi-step process, it has to be coordinated across 3 or 4 different government departments, depending on which province it's in. So how would you rate the efficiency of this process when you've got 3 and 4 different government departments that have to coordinate? And, we all hear, it's been said that government departments don't like to deal with each other and they don't cooperate very well. Do you think that's an impediment to opportunities for harvesting clams?
Well, dear sir, when you take a cab and there are 4 drivers in it, I don't think you're going to go very far, especially if there are also 4 steering wheels. So I think that there should be only a single committee, the proper one, that could follow up on the studies for soft-shell clam harvesting. There are too many groups at the government level. Things get bogged down. In my sector, we could be harvesting clam as of 10 years, but our ZIP committee said so, but then the committee wasn't created at the DFO level. What are we going to do, wait 25 more years?
Thank you. Monsieur Robert? Robert? Yeah? Did I say it right?
Yes, Robert.
Oh, I'm learning. So, how would you rate the health of the biomass of soft-shell clams, number 1? And number 2, is the stock being over-harvested, in your opinion?
No.
No.
How would you rate the overall health? Not in specific individual areas, but in general, how would you rate the health of the biomass of the clam, the plentifulness? Are there lots of clams?
Oui, il y en a beaucoup, ils sont tous en santé.
Yeah, they're plentiful and they're all healthy.
What would you like to see done as a result of this study here?
On voudrait que les coques soient ouverts.
Well, we want the areas opened so that we could go and harvest because they're good. We've shown that. They're really good. They're really good, the soft-shell clams. I can tell you we've known that for 50 years, personally.
The former Minister of Fisheries, who was the member for your riding, how come she couldn't get these problems straightened out over 10 years that she was representing your region?
Ils ne voulaient pas faire des études d'eau.
They didn't want to study the water. They didn't want to take care of it.
Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay.
Désolé, on est à temps.
I'm so sorry, we are out of time.
Go to Mr. Clausen for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. It's been interesting hearing about the traditions of your communities, and we obviously all want to ensure that these traditions carry on for future generations, as Ms. Allard, as you alluded to, that you want to make sure that your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren continue on in this area. Just a question. You talked a little bit about what this has meant to you in your raising of your family and so on. Can you talk a little bit more about the soft-shell clam harvesting, what it means to you and your community, to Ms. Allard?
Well, it's like obvious that this is, part of our home, really. It's a natural thing to go harvest them, for one, because they're delicious, they're accessible, they're there for free, and they're a good source, a good food source for the residents of the Chaleur Bay on both sides of the bay. And I can say I'm really at the end of the bay where it closes up, where it's heading to Campbellton, And for myself, I've always harvested at Saint-Omer. I go into the area where it's permitted, but to get there, I've got to walk, pretty far. And with all my material and everything, all my equipment, I love walking along the edge of the sea and even in the sea. That's not a problem, but it would be really nice to have a larger area to harvest in, because at Miguasha, there's the Nouvelle River that comes in there, so it might be imprudent for those who don't know how to cross that by foot and so on. But, of course, when the tide is low, there's no problem. But if you stay too long on the other side, well, you might get stuck. You've got to time your return. It was very natural for me, for our family, and then again now with my children. We continue this tradition. I myself still harvest in April. The time is coming. It's the right time. As Mr. Bourdage, I think it was you who said that at Easter we eat the soft-shell clam, and you can see so many people do that. There isn't that much access to the sea, though. For the Miguasha folk, there are a lot of cars and trucks around, trying to get there. They all have to drive over what's basically private land, but there's no one living there, so they can do it. But it would be really nice if there were better access to the sea coast to be able to continue respecting these traditions, which go back, I think, forever with the Mi'kmaq communities. Very close to us, those communities. I'm in Maria, and there's a community in Kaskapégiak. There's another at Aristigouche. And they are all really sort of along the Chaleur Bay, Ristigouche. Ristigouche River flows into Chaleur Bay. And these are ancient practices, truly ancient. And we certainly hope to be able to protect them. I've never heard of anyone being poisoned, so we really wonder why this is supposedly an issue.
I'm just wondering also the inventory or the stock of the clams over time. How would you rate that right now? Is there less clams than there were years ago, or maybe Mr. Bourdage? I think you wanted to answer that one. I'll throw that one at you.
Effectivement, regardez le comité de Sodim.
Yeah, right. Well, look, the Sodim committee that was headed up by the prior minister of the regions, provincially, Marcel Landry, there are 41 zones out of 48 which are now closed to harvesting, and these are not used. So what are the clams doing? They're growing there. They're not being harvested because that's prohibited. And it could have been 150 tons a year that, unfortunately, that didn't come to fruition. But that was going to be commercial harvesting. There was going to be a treatment plant put in for some of the clams that wouldn't have respected, the requirements to be eaten. But you will see what the clams do. They go under the sand, and then you can see the little holes where they're breathing through, and you can see the holes everywhere. So the volume is there. You have to have seen that once. I really invite all of you to come and see what it's really like to go clam harvesting, and I don't think we'd be here chatting about it. We'd just be out there clam fishing. What can I tell you?
Zones out of 48 zones are closed. Do you think that all 41 zones could be reopened?
Avec études
with proper studies and analyses in line with government requirements, I'm sure that we could reopen over 75% of these closed areas. The proof is Bonaventure area. That's closed. But the ZIP committee approved it. It could be opened, by sectors, yet it wasn't done in 2009. That's nearly 20 years ago, and we could have been harvesting clams since 2010 in that area because, they recommended it. And, the soft-shell clams are still in there. The tide changes twice a day. It comes in and it goes out twice a day. Pollution? Well, you take a bath, you change the water right away. And look, here, it's changed twice a day. So look, the clam, it filters itself with pure water that's coming in and out twice a day. It's very clean. Thank you very much.
Monsieur Deschamps pour 6 minutes.
Mr. Deschamps now for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our colleagues for having accepted that we debate this topic of great importance to our folk from Chaleur Bay, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us. It's really so nice to hear the Chaleur Bay accent here with Dorina, Gaston, and Ghislain. I'm so happy to discuss this. It's really important to us because I'm, told about this on a monthly basis. So I would like to discuss the problem that occurred in 1970. There was a moratorium, and that's when the federal government, in 1990 rather, all the areas were closed. Then a few were opened bit by bit. So remind me how many sites were opened before the 90s. Perhaps we could begin with you, Dorina or Gaston. I never heard of restrictions on the harvest in quantity or in size because they were abundant, the clams. I was terribly young, but we even had a way of canning them. A plant that would can them in Roussel, Robitaille, actually, and now all those towns are one town. Okay, so back when you could harvest them everywhere, well, I didn't need to go to Carleton. I mean, basically, I just went out the door. It was my backyard, but I never heard of there being any restrictions at that time. My brothers and sisters would sell their clams for a few pennies to the canning plant, and I at times would put a sign out on the road, clams for sale, a good $4, but I would rather give them than sell them. Mr. Bourdage, how about you? There was no restriction whatsoever. We would step out our back door because the shoreline of the Chaleur Bay is right there, and the community could harvest clams. It was our heritage. It's like going partridge hunting. We went clam harvesting. In Gaspésie, what's wonderful is that each season has its specialty. In the spring, it's soft shell clam harvesting. In the fall, hunting. In the summer, fishing. These are ancestral activities, the indigenous peoples, and then our lineages as well, our great-grandparents, our grandparents, they all taught us how to do this. And then there was this moratorium that took place. Everything was prohibited. We had to fight to get even small areas reopened, and yet no municipality had any water treatment plants. A question for you, Ghislain. Do you remember these wonderful years in Bonaventure when the areas were open? Could you just describe how popular it all was? Oh, my gosh. There were so many people. There were people everywhere, all over the place. They were all there to get the soft-shell clams. No one was ever ill. There were doctors practicing there. They were very happy doctors because no one was ever going in to see them saying that they were sick because of clams. And this is good for us, we Gaspé people. How many people would be out there? 200, 300 people at a time. And in 1990, Mr. Robert, when the moratorium came down, it became prohibited. So how did the people in Gaspé react to this in Chaleur Bay? Well, people would go out anyway. That happened to you? But they would get caught sometimes. Yeah, I even got chased down by a helicopter. But, hey, it's a life experience, and now we can't go at all. It's really prohibited. And how many times did you get caught in those years of the moratorium? Well, I don't know, 6, 7 times. I paid pretty big fines, $250 per clam at one point. And why did you continue to go clamming even if you had to pay these fines? Oh, I don't know. I loved it. It was just stronger than me. I couldn't avoid it. I would have gone to prison. Thank you so much, Mr. Robert. Mr. Bourdage, so back to Saint-Simeon as an example. So there is this moratorium, and then there's a big citizen movement that got underway to try to get some of the areas reopened, and thus some of the areas at Miguacha sometimes, and at times Saint-Amer as well, Port Daniel, that are open for clamming. So there was this pressure, the citizen pressure, people who wanted to get hold of the soft-shell clams, given that there are so many places where they could have been harvested. Now, you're telling us about Saint-Simeon. What went on there? Despite the citizen mobilization, the report drawn up, and the ZIP committee that got up and running, why weren't the areas reopened? Well, the conclusion of this document is that the ZIP committee in 2007 had 120 fishers, harvesters, who had been selected for soft-shell clamming, and they 180,000 clams, and then there were 60 the next year who were fishing in a zone that DFO said was contaminated and was closed, but they got authorization to go, and the conclusion proved that the zone, could be opened and that there was nothing poisoned there. That was Bonaventure West. This is a protected area of my friend. My friend Ghislain Robert said he was willing to risk his skin to go fishing in, but it's not that the clams were contaminated. No, it's just humans who can't, see their way through this. A paragraph here, and to ensure correct management by the community of the soft-shell clams in Bonaventure-Siméon, and to ensure that this management plan be applied, the promotion committee for soft-shell clam harvesting should set up a functional, well-structured administrative approach working with DFO. That was never done. So that means that we've lost a decade of right to harvest soft-shell clams in that zone only, that area only, and there are another 41 that we could analyze. Thank you so much, Mr. Deschamps. This ends our first round, and we will start our second round with Mr. Généreux. You have 5 minutes. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'm new on this committee. Hi to all. And thanks so much to my colleagues for having invited me to join you today. I'm from La Pocatière, which is along the St. Lawrence Seaway. So we fish eel. Of course, it's a declining fishery because the resource is declining, because the eels get fished by Americans and all kinds of other reasons. The glass eel. What I hear from you is that DFO basically didn't move on this for a good 10 years. They were slow. They didn't carry out the studies that they should have done to be able to reopen the harvesting areas. Is that the problem? Yes, indeed, you are right. The people at DFO, they just didn't move on this. So, that allows representatives of DFO to wander around and hand out fines more often, rather than putting the money into analyzing the area. So I imagine that DFO had that helicopter to run down guilty people. Rather than putting money in helicopters, they should have put money into water analysis. And I understand that wasn't done over quite a long time. So are you aware whether at this point in time, DFO or Environment Canada, because I think there are several departments involved, are they just tossing the ball back and forth, one to the other? Or is it just DFO that's not being responsible here? I couldn't tell you because I'm not sitting in their offices. But I worked as a civil engineer in the Gaspésie area. I worked for Transport Canada, for the Coast Guard, for water safety, and I was an engineer. I was following closely the equipment for the water treatment plants of the towns, and I can tell you it was just too big a game for them to take on. You say there were 360 areas. were they all in the Gaspé area? Well, I've got the map here in the document that we've provided to you in our brief. These are soft-shell clams, mollusks, actually, in general, not only soft-shell clams. So there's some in the north coast. They're right down to where we are. And basically there are signs everywhere to the effect that we haven't a right to harvest any of the mollusks, any of the clams there. So I've said that there are 86 areas or harvest sites, and 41 of the harvest sites out of 48 closed, so there are only 7 of them can be used. So how many years is that the case? Over 10 years? More than 20 years. Since 2009, 2007, since the moratorium, since 1990. In Quebec, there are 325 sites of coliform sites that are focused on, and there are 87 that are working. And there are 48 sites that are targeted or known, and there are 41 that are closed. And we're only allowed to use 7 of the harvest sites. Why don't they continue to analyze the waters in the sites that are opened? Mr. Allard, do you go to harvest sites that are open or those that are prohibited? And we're not going to be arresting you here. I always go to sites that are open. So there is an area near Saint-Omer. How much? About a kilometer? Not even, no. It hasn't even been expanded by a kilometer, less than that. So what would happen if that were extended, that site? Well, we've got a map. We've been given a map. But, when you're in the ocean, it's difficult to know where the map, has the line or not in the water. I mean, there are harvesters who have put in a marker. And indeed, there's one harvester, you put in a pole, basically, but that lasted a year or two, and then, of course, the ocean took it out. But I don't take chances. There's at least one house that I can rely on, knowing that as of that house in the sea there, I can harvest. Are you afraid of having helicopters hunt you down? Is that one of the reasons why you're so careful? No, I'm not afraid of that, but I would certainly take care not to go over the 59 millimeters size of clam that I'm allowed, and then quantity only 300, no more. And one officer even congratulated me on respecting the rules. So you've been stopped? Yes, indeed. They're regularly there? Well, I haven't seen them for a while, but 3 or 4 years ago, one came to me and even suggested that he could help me carry my bucket. I was very happy to walk my 3 kilometers, but he was very kind, and he saw my clams and he congratulated me because they were the right size and the right number. So these were DFO people? Yes, indeed. I know a number of people, though, who have been fined. This is very unfortunate, because if they have just 3 clams too much, I don't know, it's like $250 per extra clam over the limit. So it's difficult to know as well exactly where the area stops, where the edge of the harvest site is. Sometimes people don't really know. And also the officials sometimes don't know quite how to manage us. Some of them are strict, some aren't. I'm very sorry. I'm sorry, we have come to the end of our time.
Honors for 5 minutes.
Hello, thank you for coming out. I'm certainly enjoying this. I'm from Newfoundland, and we don't have a clam industry in Newfoundland and Labrador. Ms. Allard, you mentioned that your brothers and your sisters would collect clams and give them to a canning factory or facility.
Ils les donnaient pas, là, mais c'est...
Well, they didn't give them, but that was at the beginning of the 60s. Yeah, the 60s. Yeah, it was a canning factory. That's right. And they would harvest so many of these soft-shell clams. I mean, it was just in great quantity. I think that was permitted, as I remember. There are statistics here, okay? In the 60s, yeah, volumes of clam in the 60s. Okay, I don't quite understand the figures, but anyhow. So it was less than $1 for a bucket of soft-shell clams. In '70, it was $4, and the canning factory had closed. It closed down at some point. I remember having gone clamming and then swimming, and the tide was out. We would walk out to the end of the bed, and we would dig them out, put them in our T-shirts. You know, there was so much sun. We were really sunburnt. And then in the evening, we would make a fire and gather some friends and have a clam bake, really. Those are my memories. Or going out with my father. He was pretty quick. You had to work hard to keep up with him.
Clam fishery now? Did anyone collect these for commercial reasons?
Non, non. Non, mais c'est...
No. But they have in the past. I mean, some people were kind of pulled over, really, because they were harvesting them and they were selling them, you know, under the table. And, yeah, they were caught. And that's no longer possible.
All food type fishery, a recreational, you do it for recreation and
Oui.
you do it for your own food.
Oui, 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 absolument.
Yeah, indeed, absolutely. And it's also very healthy, walking like that, breathing the salt air. There's the estuary of Nouvelle River. There's so many birds there. And it's just as much a pleasure to go there as it is to actually harvest or to eat.
Fine that you would receive for going out clam fishing for a helicopter to chase you and to give you a fine, a penalty.
Monsieur Roberge parlait de...
Well, Mr. Roberge was mentioning $2.50 a clam over the limit. I never was fined. My son was, and he had to go to court twice, and he tried to defend himself, but he lost. We go out in the spring and in the fall as well, but sometimes in the spring it's not that hot out there yet. It's pretty chilly. And I remember it took a while for him to come back, and he was pretty cold, and that's when he was caught, and it was just for a couple of clams over the limit.
Some comments on that?
Oui, la qualité de la pêche.
Yeah, the quality of soft-shell clam harvesting, well, it depends on the water being cold. In the spring or the fall, you really can't harvest in the summer because they won't be edible. This is really important to know. And yeah, there was a canning factory, a commercial canning factory for clams in the 60s. It closed down, and then there was the moratorium in the 90s, and we couldn't harvest at all. We had 48 harvest sites in Chaleur Bay. Now only 7 are open. This created quite a precedent. And the clams that are there, they're growing, and there are a lot of them. This is one of the really small mollusks, really. And, it's no fun. Some of them are too small. 3 or 4 inches, that's a good clam. And pretty funny, at the hotel room, there was something about Maine, where they're clamming now. And I said, listen, it's funny. I'm here to talk about clams in Ottawa, and here I'm watching TV5, and they're showing me, a reportage on a Maine area where they're allowed to get these clams, and there are restaurants that serve nothing but this soft-shell clam. It's a typical food source down there in Maine. They fry them. They do all kinds of things with them. And here in Quebec, we can't do that. We're not even allowed to harvest them.
Prochainement, on va à Monsieur Deschênes pour 2 minutes.
Now we go to Mr. Deschênes for 2.5 minutes. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Let's continue this discussion, perhaps on the paradox. I'd like to hear you on this. On one side, we have the requests of people in Chaleur Bay, and every year we hear it again and again. We can read in the research documents that one of the reasons that this is not opening, that the harvest sites aren't opening, is that there are 3 departments involved, and in all cases, there aren't enough resources, both at the DFO and DCC, and basically everyone says they're at maximum capacity. So what do you think of that? On one side, they say we haven't the means to open new harvest sites, but, you go out harvesting, and there are officers of DFO out there, and recreational harvesters are being picked up. And there seems to be plenty of funds for that. And I was an attorney, and I would be defending people who had been out there as families, and they were being treated like criminals. So what's this like for you, Mr. Roberge? This disparity, there's money for repression, but there isn't any to help open up harvest sites. Well, look, they said they hadn't any money, but they certainly had enough money to run after me in a helicopter, and God knows how much that costs. And, you know, in our place, New Brunswick, 20 kilometers. That area, they hunt me people down on. And then they, in Bonaventure, you know, they say that the water's good enough for oysters, but not good enough for soft-shell clams. What's the difference? I don't know. In New Brunswick, you say there are more sites open than on our side, on the Quebec side, in Chaleur Bay. Well, I'm not sure how many are open in New Brunswick, but I do know that in New Brunswick, you have the right to harvest the clams. And you, Dorina and Gaston, what do you think of this paradox? As Mr. Lévesque was saying, it really is a paradox. It's a really stupid paradox. Ghislain was speaking of Bonaventure. DFO gave the authority to really be able to grow oysters in an area where we're not allowed to gather soft-shell clams. That makes no sense. And in New Brunswick, there's two areas where there's water treatment plants at Bathurst and Campbellton. Between the two, there's 120 kilometers, and there's no water treatment plant, and they are fishing the soft-shell clams there by the ton, and they're allowed to sell them. So it's very paradoxical. Who's sitting where? We're not sure who. Somewhere in Fisheries and Oceans who just doesn't want to move this file forward. Are they waiting for a certificate, a recognition that, you know, they're the best in the world and therefore, you know, at least in terms of fines collected? I'm so sorry. We are through on time, and with the time left, we have 3.5 minutes for Mr. Arnold.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the witnesses for being here. I'll start with Ms. Aylard, if I could. How many people have increased in, or how much has the population increased in the area that you live in and harvest in? How many more people are there now than there were 25 years ago?
Combien? Vous voulez dire toute la Gaspésie?
You mean the entirety of the Gaspé region, or just the Saint-Amer sector, Miguacha, and so on, the harvesting area? It's like maybe 1,000 people. Saint-Amer, Carleton, 5,000. Maria, 4,000.
No.
Not.
Are there more people harvesting clams than there were 25 years ago?
Ben, les familles étaient plus grandes avant, faut dire.
Well, families were more numerous in the past. I'm the last of 9 children. That's no longer the case. It's more immigration. It's bringing newcomers in, but, you know, families aren't as numerous as they used to be. And jobs are far more diverse as well. Much has changed. But I don't think it's overpopulated, you know, when it comes to harvesting clams. But, of course, if they always harvested in the same place, and maybe the clams wouldn't be as big as at Bonaventure, I imagine that would be the result.
Mr. Badage, how far apart are some of the closed areas from the open areas? How many kilometers apart would be a closed area versus an open area? Just approximately.
À peu près, ben, regardez,
Okay, approximately from Port Daniel to Miguacha, that's about 150 kilometers of shoreline. There are 48 sites along that shoreline, and there are places where there are 10, 15 kilometers that don't have any clam harvesting sites. At Bonaventure, where I am, there are probably 3 kilometers of a zone that could be a site for clams. Very specifically, in 1 kilometer, there are a lot of clams, but it is closed. Only Port de l'Île is open, then Gaspé and Port Daniel, rather. And from Port Daniel to Miguacha, that's 100 and some kilometers that have no open site on it. Why is that? When it comes to the population, the Gaspésie, we were 210,000 15 years ago. Right now, they are 82,000.
It sounds like, before I run out of time, it sounds like the open and closed areas are mixed along the shore, along the same river that rivers run downhill, like everything does. Same water flowing past all these sites, and yet some are open and some are closed. Is that correct?
Affirmatif, il y a des zones comme Bonaventure, il y a la...
Correct. There's Bonaventure that has Bonaventure River, and Port Daniel is the Port Daniel River coming down there. It's not closed, and there's a big plant right beside that. And Bonaventure, there's no plant, with wastewater going into the water. And indeed, there's a water treatment plant. And Maria, there's a water treatment plant. Carleton, there's a water treatment plant there too. Nouvelle, there's a water treatment plant. And all those areas are closed. 35 years ago, there was no water treatment plant anywhere, and we harvested as many soft-shell clams as we wanted. And I'm not sick. I'm, 72 years old, and I've been at this for decades with my father or with Ghislain and never fell ill. This is a topic, we shouldn't be here because it's the spring and the tide is out. We should be out clamming. Thank you so much, Mr. Arnold. We will wind up with Ms. Petitpas-Taylor, 3.5 minutes. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thanks again to our witnesses for being with us today, Ms. Allard, Mr. Bourdage, and Mr. Roberge. I truly appreciated your testimony. I'm an Acadian from New Brunswick, so I have gone climbing with my family, and such wonderful memories, experiences, and lived experience that is precious to us. I'd like to hear all three of you. We're carrying out a study which is really important for you and your communities. So what's the message you would like to leave us with today? Ms. Allard, could you start? Well, the message is that we hope that we have been heard. And we hope that we'll be able to more easily go harvesting clam. Fishing is permitted. So the message is, take this in hand. Perhaps get some funds from somewhere, cut elsewhere. We hear a number of things. We hear that there's money flying all over the place. But, remember us, remember citizens. Why couldn't we put a little bit of that money into something as simple? I mean, it really is simple, and it's just like low-hanging fruit. In as much as it's healthy, of course, and edible and analyzed if necessary, but I'm not afraid of that. If the soft-shell clam, is there and shouldn't be eaten, well, we won't take it, of course, but it's a pleasure to see you again, Ms. Taylor. We have met on several other occasions. It's frustrating to drive around along the shoreline of Chaleur Bay and to see clam areas that are not open for harvesting. The community, the people are just frustrated. If today we were told, if I had been able to take 3 buses of people carrying signs saying, I want to go clamming, I'm sure that we would fill all 3 buses because people aren't able to pay $250 per clam over a limit in fines because they want to go and just, harvest clams in their territory, out their back doors, in an area that's supposedly managed by DFO, but DFO's not putting their pants on. They're just not managing it correctly. And they're saying, yeah, there's sites there, they're over-contaminated or whatever. That's not the case. There are sites there that could be really fine. The truth is there. In Bengal, they had evidence of that. They got a letter on the 15th of March to the effect that the area would be open in Bengal. And Port-Cartier is open year round for clamming. I have a brother-in-law there. He's always teasing me. Gaston, I just took 5 gallons of clams. Come and have dinner. But it would take me 8 hours to get there by boat. And I say, I'll get there at Easter. You get some. I'll be there at Easter at Port-Cartier. So I see this in a good light. I think that Fisheries and Oceans, with competent officials, will be able to judge that it's the right time to open by sector or by area the harvest sites for the soft shell clam. I mean, the clams are there, and I'm sure that we could harvest them. And this is the time that we have for the first panel. I would like to thank again our witnesses for having joined us in person and remotely. Your testimony is now before the committee. We shall take it into account as we formulate our recommendations to government.
Et je vais commencer
I will begin with a few comments for the new witnesses, a few indications before taking the floor. Wait for me to recognize you by naming you, and if you're with us by video conference, please click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone, and please put it in mute when you're not speaking.
Zoom at the bottom of your screen. You can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. And just a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. J'aimerais maintenant souhaiter la bienvenue à notre...
I would like to welcome our witnesses from the Center for Initiation to Research and Support for Sustainable Development. We have Esteban Figueroa, Researcher and Executive Assistant, Impact on Training. From Mérinov, we have David Courtemanche, General Manager, and Marie-Gilles Fortin, Industrial Researcher, Project Manager. Both are joining us by video conference. And from the Mi'kmaq Volontoqek Indigenous Fisheries Management Association, we have Catherine Lambert Koizumi, Executive Director, and
Rome Commercial Fisher, both by video conference. So, alors, nous avons commencé avec les...
We will begin with the opening statements of our witnesses. You have 5 minutes or less. Let us begin with Mr. Esteban Figueroa. Hello, Mr. Chair and committee members. First, let me thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak today to the committee about recreational and traditional fishing for softshell clam on the Gaspé Peninsula, an activity that's deeply rooted in history, as you can see from the testimony you've heard, and the coastal communities who are in relationship with their area. In the course of my work as a researcher in the field of sustainable local development, in 2020, we started a project with historians, an ethnographic study with a documentary too, and the results of this investigation, this study then, shows that softshell clam fishing remains, even today, a vibrant and socially important activity in the Gaspé Peninsula. Every spring and fall, hundreds of Gaspé residents gather in the tidelands to carry out this activity, which is very symbolic as well, signaling the change of seasons, the ability to access the sea after a long winter, and all the rest. It's a true temporal and cultural signifier, this particular fishing activity, linked with key times on the social and family calendar, as you have seen by hearing your witnesses. And the main findings that I'd like to share with you are the following. There are 3 of them. There's the intangible heritage aspect, the sustainable local development aspect, and the food self-sufficiency element, all linked to this practice. So clam fishing is part of the region's intangible cultural heritage based on local knowledge and on social practices and activities passed on from generation to generation, as you have heard, all confirming that this activity truly meets the criteria for intangible cultural heritage. It's not taught through textbooks or formal training, but directly on site. It's an oral tradition taught by real people from generation to generation. The learning involves observing the tides, recognizing the air vents, knowing which areas are accessible, and knowing the unwritten rules of courtesy among fishers. It depends on relationships and has to do with identity of people who maintain a close link with the Gaspé coast. Now, speaking about sustainable local development, the study highlighted some self-regulating mechanisms that are well established among the clam fishers. These harvesters, whom we interviewed, about 15 of them, emphasized the importance of having respect for other users of the resource, exploiting overfishing, and respecting the area's capacity to be used. As Ms. Allard mentioned, this culture of moderation and respect for the local environment is a solid foundation on which controlled openings of new harvesting areas could be based. It shows that clam harvesting is not an unbridled activity, but rather a socially regulated local practice that's compatible with sustainable management principles. Finally, food self-sufficiency. The testimony that we gathered revealed that clam harvesting already makes a significant contribution to the local food supply. The clams are eaten fresh, processed, canned, or added to family recipes that have been handed down for generations. Many of the clam harvesters explicitly link this activity to a kind of food self-sufficiency, emphasizing that it's a local, accessible, and available resources, contrasting it to industrialized food models. Opening new areas would boost this contribution to the food supply while strengthening the resilience of coastal communities. Beyond the nutritional dimension, clam fishing or harvesting is replete with symbolism. As I've already said, it represents a tangible relationship with the land. People really identify with the land through this practice, and also a relationship with natural cycles and the sea, the spring, the fall. It's seen as being distinctive and linked to Gaspé identity. This recognition is shared by all and really strengthens the legitimacy of the practice. It's traditional as well. So given the current issues surrounding food self-sufficiency and sustainable development, it would seem necessary to rethink the regulatory framework governing access to this recreational fishery and to consider a controlled opening of new harvesting areas. This opening should be based on a gradual and coordinated approach that includes rigorous environmental assessments, with sampling and so forth, taking into account local knowledge. I'm so sorry. We have run through your time. Thank you so much. So just to conclude, I could say that the results of our project show that the clam fishing is a living practice that has a good deal of meaning to the local communities. And by recognizing all this and adapting the regulations applied to the territory, the federal government could work with these communities to manage the resources long term. Thank you very much. And we will now hear Mr. David Courtemanche and Marie-Gilles Fortin. You have 5 minutes or less for your opening statement. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for inviting us to this session. Marineuve is Canada's largest integrated industrial research and innovation centre, specializing in fisheries, aquaculture, seafood processing, and marine bioresources. In Canada, it's a nonprofit organization. And our mission is to support organizations and businesses working in this sector. And for Marineuve, this is in fisheries. The topic at hand, we have acted as a subcontractor for Environment Canada for over 30 years, conducting water quality analyses in the shellfish harvesting areas of the Gaspé Peninsula and Magdalen Islands for the Canadian Shellfish Sanitation Program that I will call the CSSP. Marineuve has a team trained to collect water samples according to established standards and a fleet of Zodiac boats of various sizes, which allow us to sample in open waters and shallow waters. Marineuve also operates a microbiology laboratory, which is correctly accredited by international standards for fecal coliform analysis in seawater. using the required methods. It's the only laboratory in eastern Quebec with this accreditation. The opening and closing of shellfish production or harvesting sites is a complex process involving 3 departments, as you know: Environment and Climate Change Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and sampling and analysis service providers such as us, Marineuve. And, of course, these analyses support the decisions made by the departments, the agencies, and so on. It's important to prevent poisoning that can be fatal and to keep export markets open to Canadian products. With your permission, I will now turn this over to Marie-Gilles Fortin, who's a researcher with us and who is in charge with Environment Canada of water analysis. She can give you more details about our role and the main points linked to the topic that you are discussing and how we help the local area with harvesting and opening sites. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been responsible since 2022 for the project we have with Environment Canada. In our mandate with them, we sample and analyze water. Environment Canada is responsible for interpreting the results and recommending whether to open or close shellfish harvesting areas. And they draw up the sampling plans. Based sometimes on their available budget, we perform regular CSSP analyses and also offer water assessment, sampling, and analysis services to aquaculture businesses or even community groups that want to open new sites for commercial or recreational harvesting. Opening a new site requires different types of evaluations and analyses. The first step is to assess the abundance of biomass at the target site. This assessment is the responsibility of Fisheries and Oceans Canada. And we've checked with them. They have agreed to share their methodology and consider the results of an assessment conducted by Marineuve for shellfish, soft-shell clams. The density depends on the type of sediment. Sites with fine mud and sand are conducive to the presence of soft-shell clams. Their second step is to assess the sources of pollution that could affect the sites that have been found. The most common sources of pollution that can prevent a site from opening are wastewater treatment systems and runoff from agricultural areas. This step is the responsibility of Environment Canada. They already have a lot of information. They've evaluated a number of sites. Not all of this is public, so it would be important to check with them to see if the sites in question have already been assessed. The third step is water quality monitoring. Sampling and laboratory analysis are carried out by service providers and sent to Environment Canada. Opening a new site requires a minimum of 15 sampling rounds over a 2-year period. Once the site is classified by the CSSP, regular monitoring with 5 sampling rounds must be conducted annually. The fourth and final step is to assess the biotoxins present in the flesh of the mollusks. This is carried out by CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, but is only a last resort since the toxins do not remain in the flesh for long and it would be pointless to look at them too far in advance. Finally, it's important to note that it is really the Interministerial Committee for Shellfish of Quebec, the Regional Interministerial Committee for Shellfish, that is the entry point for submitting a request to open a protected area. And we could provide assistance with biomass characterization and water quality monitoring for the opening of new harvesting sites. Thank you very much. And we will now end with Ms. Catherine Lambert-Cousimi and Jeremy Jerome. 5 minutes or less, please. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will begin. I'm Catherine Lambert-Cousimi. I'm an executive director of Mi'kmaq and Wallatoki Indigenous Fisheries Management Association. It's a pleasure to be here. Our group supports 3 First Nations of Gewaskabi and Wonostook in the sustainable management and conservation of marine ecosystems, recognizing their rights and promoting their participation in fishing and aquaculture. Since time immemorial, the fishing of soft-shell clams has been essential to our community, and we wish to regain access to historic harvesting sites that have been closed for several years, though several of them show real potential for reopening. Access remains limited for three main reasons. Firstly, closures do not always reflect proven risks, but often a lack of recent data to confirm safety. Second, federal resources allocated to sampling and analysis have declined since the 80s, creating a knock-on effect of closures, fewer stations, less data, fewer areas open. Finally, the current model of the Canadian Shellfish Safety Monitoring Program does not incorporate the capabilities and knowledge of First Nations people, despite their continuous presence on the territory and their expertise in management. So we propose three concrete solutions. 1, reinvest in testing and monitoring programs. 2, involve First Nations in data collection and monitoring. 3, implement co-management pilot projects to gradually reopen areas where data shows adequate safety. We think that reopening sites is possible, safe, and desirable. It simply requires targeting reinvestment and real collaboration with communities. I'll hand this over to my colleague, Jeremy Jerome, who will tell us how important this activity is for his community and for himself. Thank you. Thank you, Catherine.
I spoke my mother tongue because that's who I am. And I thank the president for having me here, along with everybody else around the table. I would like to speak of the clam in particular. It's an important food source. It's the beginning of a new era, or new season. And to not be able to harvest this little delicacy, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard not to. Like my friend Gaston mentioned, we drive by a long stretch of coastline, and we're not allowed to stop and pick. And if I could say, it's heartbreaking. We have elders that are still existing in our communities that are not. They don't have access, and it's not everybody that I don't know how to express it. I'm here before you because I was asked to, but I'm here because this is something that I've been affected by. And hopefully we band together the people that are trying from Bonaventure, from Port Daniel, all these places that pick the clam, not just the Mi'kmaq in particular, but the people, the small communities that thrived on the clam.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Jerome. And with that, we're going to go into the first round of questions, starting with Mr. Small for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is to Emiranov, for either of you folks that would like to answer it. How's the quality of the water and the occurrence of toxins, pathogens, and whatnot currently compared to how it was when you began in your role in testing the water for these various government departments?
La qualité de l'eau est quand même relative.
Water quality is pretty much what it was in the past, pretty similar. I mean, we are testing only in zones that are open, and generally the quality of the water that we're analyzing there, because these are, of course, areas and sites that have been selected, they're open. I don't have information about the sites that aren't followed up on, so I have no information over time for them.
Do the people of Baie de Chaleur expect to gain equitable access to these clam harvesting areas if the areas that are closed aren't being tested? That sounds awful strange to me.
Ouais, peut-être, là-dessus, je pourrais peut-être ajouter qu'effectivement.
Well, yeah, perhaps I could add that there may be, like, let's say 20 years ago, most of these sites were opened and were tested. And a decision was taken back then by the Department of the Environment to focus on the zones where there was a commercial capacity, and the others were closed kind of by default. That's why we're now in a situation where 20, 25 years later, these sites were kind of closed by default, and now these community organizations, or even if businesses want to have an area open, they have to demonstrate, pretty exhaustively that it's safety and, for that zone, for that area of production or of fishing or harvesting.
How efficient do you think the process is? You're working amongst 3 departments federally in all the in both provinces there, or 4 provinces, and in Quebec you're looking at 4 government, an additional on top of the 3 federal ones. You've got a provincial one there. Do you think that we've got some overzealous bureaucrats looking after their own jobs while punishing the people that are relying on this resource? Is that possible?
We're not in position to comment on this aspect. However, the 3 different departments have different fields of expertise, or fields where they have to accredit or to open or close a site. There are different mandates associated with this department. From what we've seen, we don't think it's an efficiency issue here. It's more resources issue. As Catherine just mentioned it a few minutes ago, the resources were diminished or reduced in the 2 different departments, and probably led to this kind of situation where now the public has to pay for these kind of services.
Monsieur Courtemanche, was the funding that was allocated to carry out this testing, was that coming from the aquatic ecosystems budget within DFO?
En ce qui concerne l'échantillonnage qu'on fait.
The sampling that we carry out now, these funds come from Environment Canada. Every 3 years, more or less, depending on how long the contract is, we renew the contract. And generally, yes, there are often funding issues. The department has a limited number of financial resources that it can use for sampling right now. Every 3 years, the department basically tells us the same thing, that they haven't enough resources.
Problem. And there were many, many years in the last 10 years where there was lots of funding. There's been some cuts here this year, but this is a multi-year problem that we're looking at here. So can you blame the buildup of this crisis in the local communities on budgeting when it's a 10-year-old problem?
We cannot comment on this one.
Anyone? Okay, Monsieur Généreux, would you like to have what's left?
Seulement 10 secondes. Alors, on aurait un prochain tour.
We'll take that another round. We've only got 10 seconds left.
To Mr. Clausen for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, and again, welcome to the witnesses. It sounds like there is an issue of a bit of manpower or person power shortage to go out and do all the testing, and I'm sure we're all in agreement that we want to ensure the safety is out there for the people who are consuming the fish, or the shellfish as well as for the harvesters. Mr. Figueroa, you talked about socially and culturally appropriate processes, and I'm wondering, is there a commercial component to this, that if there was enough testing, that we could look at a commercial component to harvesting?
Yes. What I mentioned is that this is a recreational fishery. There isn't a commercial element to it at present. In the harvest sites that are open right now, it seems it would be difficult to include, commercial fishing. The attempt at present is to provide greater access to citizens for recreational clamming. There's been no commercial use for a number of years. What we're looking for is really supporting the community and social aspect of this activity, which is really important in the Gaspé Peninsula. That's why we see there are experts who are able and willing to cooperate in an interdisciplinary approach that could be very helpful to set up, but the resources, there just are fewer and fewer of them.
A question to Ms. Fortune. I think you said from the time that there wasn't enough manpower, enough people to test the waters. I'm wondering, from the time a request goes in to open a site, how long is the testing process before a site can be opened again?
Donc, Environnement Canada demande
Environment Canada calls for a series of 15 analyses over 18 months before opening a site. Perhaps it could be opened if they have historical data to back that decision up, if they, in their data banks, past data, then they might ask for fewer analyses. But if it's a site that's never been studied before, that will be 15 samples over 18 months.
New technologies or methods that could speed up the testing process?
le processus de test comme tel est pas.
The test process per se doesn't take long. The analysis is finished within 30 hours of sampling the water, so you don't really need extra HR to carry out the analysis. The delays are simply to be able to take these measurements over a year and a half. They need to cover all seasons, so you can't make that any faster.
I think, Ms. I'm not sure how to say it, Kuzumo. I'm wondering, is there a commercial component to the indigenous communities for the fishing, harvesting?
En ce moment, on parle de pêche de sub.
At present, it's a subsistence fishery for food, ritual, and social and ceremonial purposes, but it could be an activity that could help diversify the economy. In New Brunswick, it is a commercial fishery. I don't see why that couldn't take place in Quebec as well. It could be part of a diversification of revenue for the communities, revenue sources. I'm sure Jeremy might wish to add something. No, not necessarily, but just about subsistence fishing, food, it would already be a good thing to have that.
Though, Mr. Jerome, you mentioned about the elders and that there had been there's a lack of being able to fish right now, and that they would appreciate having that back as it is a tradition within their culture. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Culturally speaking, given the number of years we haven't had access, it's sad to say that it's a dying. Right now, I can speak for myself because I'm an active commercial fisherman, and I'm still healthy enough to go out and pick just the same.
All agree that we don't want to see this as a dying part of your tradition. So if there was a way that we could bring this back into your culture, how would you see that process happening?
Basically, just having more access. Within our community, we by rights we have access to the east and to the west of our community. So, and given the closures of areas, we're right in the middle of it all, and.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clausen. And that prochainement, on va à Monsieur Deschênes pour 6 minutes.
Mr. Deschênes, you have 6 minutes. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for your very helpful testimony. It's teaching us a lot. What we can see is that there's a technical need for to ensure that other sites could be opened. Thank you, Mr. Jérôme, for your testimony. I agree with you that this is a topic that all communities in La Baie des Chaleurs or Chaleur Bay could work together to reappropriate and to resuscitate, if you wish, a culture that is unfortunately suffering. So your memory of clamming is in Meskakagag, correct? Do you remember all that? Yes, to the west of the community, in the village of Maria. We would walk along the shoreline on foot. It would take us about, 30, 45 minutes to reach the area that I remember. That's still there, of course. I've been there. And I could say, well, they didn't take me to jail, but, the fishery agents, they got me, and I had to go to court, and, I had to pay fines. But that never kept me from, clamming. You're like Ghislain. A little bit, yep. There are a lot of things that go on at night, even in fishing. So you're telling us about how important this activity is. So you have seen firsthand the repression, DFO agents who were there and who find you. Yes. But after a good discussion with a gang of them, I do remember that, when it comes to HR, human resources, I was there all alone with one of my cousins only, and there were 4 or 5 agents out there on the beach. I went to see them, to see what was going on with them. And they explained to me that this was a dune that was closed. I didn't have a right to use it. They talked to me about tests, and I asked them about the validity of the tests. I asked, when was the last time you tested this area, this infamous test that's always supposedly going on? And they all looked at each other, all 4 or 5 of them, and they realized they had no answer for me. Basically, they turned and said, yeah, we don't know. That was the answer I got. Thank you, Mr. Jérôme. A question for you, Ms. Lambert-Cousumi, because we do see that, the water is okay because there are sites nearby and there's a technical ability to open the sites that are closed, but the problem is lack of resources, and the federal government doesn't want to move on this. I made a request to open sites in December, and the answer I got was, we must inform you that at present, the Canadian Shellfish Sanitation Program does not have the capacity to accept new requests for expanding sites due to lack of resources. So, have you had similar answers from the government? Yes, we have. We are in the same situation. We have a site in the Pespignac area where we grow algae. Since 2018, we grow algae there. One of our mandates is diversification, and we wanted to bring in some aquaculture by bringing in certain shellfish in that area, and scallops in that case, and we hoped we would work with Mérineuve to get some water sampling done to get a permission to add the scallop to the aquaculture permit list. But we were told, no, it wasn't seemingly money, because we had the money and we were going to get the analyses carried out ourselves. But I don't have the answer, but that's more or less like what you just read, Mr. Deschamps. That's what we were told, too, that right now there's no way forward. We don't really know why, but there's no service available to get our request dealt with. So the site you've spoken of, Mr. Courtemanche, will go to you next, but you were ready to pay for the sampling. Oh, yes, of course. So they said we haven't even enough time to look at this? Yeah, it wasn't even a matter of funding, because we had some funding programs that we had organized to help us develop this aquaculture, but it seems that we couldn't go any further than that because the federal government was unable to provide us with an answer, unable to respond to a request. Well, Mr. Courtemanche, you wanted to add something. Yes, indeed. The fact that are only a very few number of sites open, such that the pressure on those sites is really much stronger than if there were other sites. So it comes to managing the biomass, I think this is an issue. I, too, have gone shellfish clamming with my father-in-law back when, and there were days when it was open, and in the areas that were open, there were just so many people there picking the clams, which really underscores how important this is as a social activity in the Gaspé Peninsula. I'm sorry, I haven't much time, but what you're saying is of the highest importance. All said and done, the federal government's refusal to open new harvest sites, telling us they haven't enough resources, but meanwhile they're sending agents in to fine everybody, has an effect on the long-term survivability of the sites that are open. Yes, indeed, if people could be spread over more harvest sites, it would be better for the stock. I'm terribly sorry. We have gone over time, which brings an end to the first round, and we will now move into the second round. We may hear bells calling us to a vote in the House, but I hope we will be able to get unanimous consent to go a bit over time into the bells. Right now, Mr. Généreux, you have 4 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lambert, I won't try your family name because I'm afraid I'm going to make a mess of it, your second family name. To your knowledge, First Nations have hunting rights. I mean, I know this in some territories in the Gaspé Peninsula, unless I'm mistaken. So don't they have the same sort of rights for fisheries, ancestral rights, Yes, indeed. Yeah. Yeah, there are treaties recognizing ancestral rights, treaty rights, basically. You're quite right. these are agreements between communities and the government. On a yearly basis, there's a kind of protocol administrative that the nations have to go through. They have to add species that they want to have covered by permits. Sometimes there are agreements, sometimes there aren't. It really depends on the species. I'm sorry, I must interrupt. We do have the bells. Do we have unanimous consent to continue for another 10 minutes? Very well, then. Are these agreements that you have with the federal government only or also with the provincial government? It depends. Basically, there are some species that are managed at the provincial level. So ocean species, that's federal, involving agreements with the federal government. But in some cases, for salmon and others, those are managed by the province. That said, the First Nations certainly do have rights that are recognized. Mr. Courtemanche, we heard Mr. Brodage tell us earlier that over a distance of around 150 kilometers, there are some areas that are open and others that aren't. What's the difference between the water in the Baie des Chaleurs, or Chaleur Bay, over 150 kilometers, such that in Site X, supposedly that's great water, and 2 or 3 10 kilometers over to one side or the other, the water's no good? I'd really like to understand this. I mean, they don't analyze the water at every 2 inches over 150 kilometers. They go in certain places and get the water in certain sectors. Mr. Brodage was telling us that right now there are 7 sites that are opened of a potential of 48 over around 150 kilometers of shoreline, if I understood Mr. Brodage correctly. So how is it decided that the water's no good 5 kilometers away from a place where supposedly it's fantastic? Please explain this. Well, it's quite local. So there are also, agriculture, runoffs, water treatment plants that work or don't, and there can be certain events affecting the land. Climate change events can lead to waste going directly into the sea in certain places. So such that one site very close to another should be shut and the other one left open. But that's not the issue at present. The issue is that in the sites that are closed now are closed by default. They're only closed because there was no sampling there. And it's possible that if sampling were carried out there, it might be possible to open them. So that's the issue. So if I understand you correctly, Mr. Courtemanche, the quantity of resource in the 7 sites that are open is being diminished on the pretext that the water hasn't been sampled. We don't even know if it's good or not in other places that could be opened. So basically, we're destroying the soft shelf clam base and mass in the sites that are open because we're not sampling elsewhere. So this makes no sense at all. Moreover, we're investing to have people come in and watch, the shoreline day and perhaps night with helicopters and so forth. That seems to cost a lot, but we can't put any money into research. I think that the Gaspé Peninsula should stand up and say this is nonsensical. This is forget it. This isn't working, and do something about it. Call for a study. When it comes to traditions, First Nations, quality of life, we've been eating it for 50 years. They're 75 and they've never gotten sick before. At some point, hey, a little common sense, everybody. We can just test it. You can walk and chew gum, can't we, here in Canada? I mean, you can have sites that are open and you can analyze the water whether or not open. And I understand, Mr. Brodage, that of course there's a river coming in with possible agricultural runoff. That could make a difference. But the fact that the water is coming in and out and cleaning out the area twice a day, same thing in the St. Lawrence Seaway. We see this. The water quality has gotten so much better thanks to this. And thanks to this, there being water treatment plants pretty much everywhere in the Gaspé Peninsula as well. I just think we need more studies because, it would be good to hear the officials on this. Unfortunately, we must move on. We now hear Mr. Maurici for 4 minutes.
Going to turn my time over to Monsieur Deschênes.
D'accord. Monsieur Deschênes, vous avez 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes, Mr. Deschênes. Thank you to Mr. Généreux for his support. Much appreciated. Much appreciated, I'm sure, by the people of the Gaspé Peninsula. Let's say we manage to get some political will behind this, to get to the bottom of this injustice, which has set aside the people of Chaleur-Bay for far too long. So, Marina, you are a contractor for Environment Canada, Mérinov. Would you be able to carry out the studies required to test the water and open sites? Yes, we could. We could also train community groups, people able to sample the water. There are a number of organizations in the Gaspé Peninsula that are already structured and up and running, and we could train them, and this would reduce the costs. Could you tell us a bit more about this? How would this work? Would these be volunteers? Well, it depends, but there are local resources across the territory. We're talking a lot about the Baie des Chaleurs, but there are people elsewhere and groups elsewhere in the Gaspé Peninsula. So I think that, yes, we're able to offer the technical details, and for the sampling, we could use alternative approaches for actually gathering the water, the sampling, and we can offer the actual analysis. Ms. Lambert-Cousimi, what's your view of this? If there were a will to open sites, could we work with you? Yes, I think that our association involves keepers, guardians in each of our communities, and it might work quite well to have them sample several times a year per season, the 15 times over 18 months. I don't see that as problematic. We could start by targeting the shorelines that are near communities, that are priorities for the communities, that are closed but that had been used in the past traditionally, and this could be carried out across the entirety of the territory. We would certainly favor that, and for a number of years we have spoken of reopening the shellfish sites. It would really count for us. So how would you participate? These would be volunteers from First Nations communities? Well, not necessarily volunteers. I think that funds should be made available to pay people to go and sample the waters, without exaggerating, of course. But I think it would be important to ensure that the sampling be carried out correctly and on schedule, but it would be very useful to work up such an approach to encourage, this approach. Again, not volunteers. It would be nice to have funds to pay them, but, if we have to move to a volunteer approach, we could surely find them as well. I would like to involve the communities along the shoreline in the sampling process. And I think, obviously, the cost would go to analyses, and it's a large territory, so it might require a lot of analyses. So it might be a very relevant project. All communities along the shoreline would work together. Correct. Mr. Courtemanche, costing. What would this cost? Generally speaking, the cost of opening a new shellfish, soft-shell clam site. I know that testing, lasts for over a year. What does this cost? I'd like to tell you more about costing, but what really costs a lot is working on a specific site. If there were a number of different sites trying to open at once, we would be able to sample all of them at once. So it might cost less per site or per zone. Costing one set of samples, once out in the Zodiac to test all the different areas, about $5,000 per outing. And if you can cover 3 sites in the same day, of course it's going to cost less. You can do them all in one outing rather than one site one day and going out the next day for another. So about 75,000 if it's 3 sites a day, 15 sites, about, if you've got 5 sites a day, that'll cost you 6,000. Basically, it's going to cost you much less if you cover more sites. A question for you, Mr. Figueroa, or perhaps Mr. Lambert, Madame Lambert-Cousimi, you wanted to add something about costing? Yeah, I'd like to add, not necessarily with volunteers, but working with communities who are truly near the potential sites. We have zodiacs, for example, and we could even be able to bring down the cost of the outings. And when it comes to the number of sites to be opened, from Gaspé down the coast, I'm not sure if one of you who knows the fishing areas would be able to tell us how many sites we would need to open to really facilitate access to the resource. Well, let me pick up on what my colleagues said a few moments ago. You can carry out some participative social research to reduce costs by having citizens get involved in sampling. There are groups who have already come together to try to work on providing access to this resource along the shoreline. So there's a will there to reduce costing, and I think that would be possible. We could also set up an interdisciplinary project with historians, social science researchers. What really counts is integrating all local knowledge, First Nation knowledge, of course, but also knowledge held by the fishers who've been doing this for generations, and personally for 50 years, they'll know a good deal about what's to be done. Thank you so much, Mr. Deschamps, and this brings
all of our witnesses for being here in person and by video conference. Testimonies can be very helpful as we finalize our report and recommendations to government. Just to flag, our next meeting is going to be on Monday, April 13th, where we're going to review the Fisheries Act study. So any recommendations, please send those in advance so we can go through that quicker. But with that, meeting adjourned.